You're listening to Soap Dirt, the latest in television entertainment news.
Hey there, ABC soap opera fans. This is Soap Dirt on YouTube, and we want to talk today about Maxie Jones' death curse. So many guys that she has been involved with have died in terrible ways, and we want to talk about that today. And we want to thank Twitter user Canadian Fuzzy, who gave us this idea in response to our Michael Corinthos death curse article, because a lot of women he's been with have died. And Canadian Fuzzy said, now do one on Maxie's curse. Her number is double Michael's, LOL. It's not quite double, but it is stunning, and you won't believe it. We're going to dig into that in just a second. If you haven't already clicked that subscribe button, reach down, bop the button so you can follow Soap Dirt on YouTube and you don't miss any of your hot spoilers and fun things like this, where we take a look back at Maxie Jones' death curse. I'll tell you right off the top of the head, there's 7 men she's been involved with that have died. 3 of them were cops. So they should just keep Maxie away from anybody who works at the PCPD, because she is quite literally the kiss of death. So let's start with her very first boyfriend, Jesse Beaudry, who was Lucky Spencer's partner. And way back then, he was played by Matt Maracini. That's who played Jesse Beaudry. And they met when Maxie was in the hospital for heart issues, and Jesse was on the run, hiding from the police. He had been framed. He was a police officer, but then he had been accused of this crime falsely. And so he'd lost his police privileges and he was running around, and she fell for him and helped him hide out. And eventually he got his badge back and they fell for each other. Jesse and Maxie were first loves. And while working with Lucky, Jesse was shot in the head and died despite brain surgery. He was declared brain dead. This happened in summer 2005 to spring 2006. And boy, Maxie was on a roll with guys that died that were in her lives. And that was the first one, Jesse Beaudry. Now, let's dig into the next one. Cooper Barrett, played by Jason Gerhardt. She generally referred to him as Coop instead of Cooper. He was her next love. She lost Jesse in spring of 2006, and then in January of 2007, Cooper Barrett came on the scene, and he lasted a full year before Maxie's death curse struck again. He was an Iraq war veteran who became a police cadet. He was actually Sonny Corinthos' inside man. Sonny had placed him into the cadet program so that he'd have somebody on the inside of the PCPD to keep him informed so that he could keep his mob activities away from the police. Now, Maxie first met Cooper when he was a hostage taker. He was one of the people who had taken hostages at the Metro Court back in the day. He was masked and he was using the name 3, technically the number, but he was only 3. Then Maxie unmasked him, saw how hot he was, and she actually helped him get away. This was back when Maxie was full on just a very devious and bad girl. She soon found out that 3's real name was Cooper Barrett, whom she called Coop, and she was definitely in her bad girl phase, and she helped him cheat his way into the police academy, which she knew he was doing at Sonny's behest. But he had died of an apparent suicide. That was how it came out, because he was facing accusations that he was the text message killer, and then he was found hung to death, and so people assumed that was a guilty action, but it wasn't. In fact, the real text message killer had faked his hanging. And if you remember way back then, the real text message killer was Diego Alcazar. So poor Coop was her second dead cop boyfriend. But there's more coming. Logan Hayes was the next guy to come along, and his run was March 2007 to July 2008, and Logan was played by Josh Doohan. He was another Iraq war veteran who worked for Sonny, and he was actually a friend of her prior dead boyfriend, Coop. So Maxie and Logan and Cooper had been blackmailing Scotty Baldwin, but it turned out that Scotty was actually Logan's biological father. So it was very messy, and Logan was hot for Maxie even when she was with his friend Coop. And then, again, reminder, this was her bad girl phase. Maxie and Logan made a bet. She bet him that if he could get Lulu Spencer into her bed, that then she would sleep with him, that she would cheat on Coop with him. And that was back when Lulu and Maxie were frenemies. They weren't best friends, they were rivals, and Maxie used to do bad things to her. And as a matter of fact, Logan did get Lulu in bed, and then he started to really fall for Lulu, but the whole bet thing with Maxie came out, and Lulu was furious and just told him to go away. And then he was in turn furious at Maxie, and he attacked her, and Lulu saw him do it, and she ran to the rescue. There was all this chaos, and Lulu stabbed him to death to save Maxie. So that was the third guy by 2008 that Maxie had been with who died. Now, the next person we're going to talk about is somebody that wasn't a long-term love of hers or anything. It was a one-night stand, but he did end up dying violently, so we have to include it. That's the way these things work. And that is Franco. And that was back, interestingly enough, when the role originated by Hollywood actor James Franco. If you don't remember this, James Franco approached General Hospital and asked them if he could be on the show. And he was this A-list celeb, and so they're like, okay. So he created the role of Franco, the artist slash serial killer, and he actually had his real life mom, Betsy Franco, playing Franco's mom, Betsy Frank. So it was very weird. And back then, Maxie was working for Crimson Magazine, and Franco was this famous artist. This was before everybody knew he was a serial killer, and she was tasked in getting him to do this photo cover shoot, and as part of it, she slept with him. When James Franco was in the role, this was the November 2009 to 2010 initial run for the character before they brought him back with Roger Howarth playing the role. So Franco was this big-time artist, and it then came out he was a serial killer. Maxie spent the night with him, but immediately regretted it because she was back then in love with Spinelli, as she has been off and on for years. And then he left, and there was just all this chaos. And then they had originally brought Roger Howarth on the show to play another character, but he wasn't legally allowed to play Todd Manning anymore because of this whole lawsuit between Prospect Park and ABC over old characters. So they recreated Franco, brought him back from the dead, and put Roger Howarth in the role. And Roger Howarth as Franco was shot and killed by Peter August, interestingly enough, another of Maxie's lovers that wound up dead that we're going to talk about in just a few minutes. So although Maxie wasn't dating Franco at his time of death, still another dead lover who had been in her bed and then wound up pushing up daisies. Now, number 5 on the list. Do you remember this guy? Levi Dunkleman, aka Peter Harrell Jr., who was played by Zachary Garrett. This was in spring of 2014 to fall of 2014. Maxie Jones had been off in Europe and other places doing this kind of eat, pray, love thing, and she met Levi, who seemed like this really cool vegan hippie dude. They met and became lovers while doing volunteer work. What Maxie didn't know was it wasn't a casual meet cute, that Levi had sought her out and specifically hooked up with her, and it was all about her parents, Felicia and Mac, and the Aztec jewel story from the 80s, because Peter Harrell Jr., as Levi's real name was the son of Peter Harrell Sr., who was somebody that Felicia and Mac had to deal with back in the day, and it wound up ugly, and Sr. was holding a grudge against them and had tasked his son to help him get revenge. So when Levi and Maxie came back to town, Nathan West, another of her future dead lovers, had been subletting her apartment, but then Maxie demanded that they be able to stay there. So it was really awkward because it was Levi and Maxie and Nathan. And of course, Nathan's walking around looking all hot and everything. And how can you not notice that? But Nathan and Maxie were at odds, and they did not like each other at first at all. And things got worse because Levi did all he could to sabotage Nathan and discredit him and make him look bad, which made Maxie dislike Nathan even more. Levi and Maxie Maxie were going to get married, and he was going to marry her to get a hold of the Aztec jewels. By then, Nathan had figured out that he was a really bad guy. Everybody had figured it out, and the wedding turned to chaos. And then we saw Levi's awful dad, Peter Harrell Sr., was going to stab Maxie with an Aztec dagger to get revenge on her parents. Nathan shot Sr. and killed him. And then when he was struggling with Levi, who was going to try and kill Nathan for him killing his dad, it was Maxie who actually stabbed Levi. So she stabbed her lover to death, and that was her fifth lover who died terribly. Next on the list, of course, is Nathan West, who was her next romance and her third police officer lover that died. Ryan Pavey played Nathan from January 2014 to February 2018. He had a 4-year run on the soap. A lot of people still really miss Ryan Pavey. If you don't remember Nathan's backstory, his birth name was James Nathan Reeves because Madeline Reeves raised him, but that was at the request of her sister Liesl Obrecht, who was actually Nathan's birth mother. The problem is his biological father was uber criminal Cesar Faison, and Liesl was terrified that Faison would take Nathan away from her and warp him, and so she let her sister raise him. So he grew up thinking that sketchy Madeline Reeves was his mother, and then he came to Port Charles as a police officer. Although Nathan and Maxie did not get off to the best start because of awful Levi, after he saved her life, they began sparking and they fell deeply in love. At the time of his death, Maxie was pregnant with their son James, who Nathan would never meet. Faison came to town, creating havoc and doing bad and violent things, and he was rampaging around at the Crimson offices and shot Nathan right in front of Maxie, who of course was screaming and breaking down. And interestingly enough, that ties directly into her most recent lover who died, Peter August, who was Faison's other son. And so he was Nathan's half-brother. Peter was there at the time that Nathan was shot, but no one knew at the time that he was related to Nathan or related to Faison. So Nathan was taken over to General Hospital. They did surgery. He came out of surgery and he woke up. And so Maxie thought, oh, this is great. He's going to survive this. Their baby started kicking in her belly. Nathan put his hand on the belly, felt his unborn child kick, and told Maxie that, I love you like there's no tomorrow. And then he died. And it was awful. So before we get into our seventh and last dead lover of Maxie Jones, if you haven't already clicked that subscribe button, click that below so that you don't miss any of your latest General Hospital updates and fun videos like this one. So Maxie's most recent fatal romance is, of course, Peter August, aka Henrik Faison, who was Nathan's half-brother. His mother was Alex Merrick, although for a while Anna Devane had thought that she gave birth to him because of implanted memories due to this whole memory plot, but she cared for him as if he was her son, even though she finally realized that he was her nephew. He had a run on General Hospital that was pretty lengthy. Wes Ramsey played Peter from November 2017 to his death in February of 2022. Peter was just horrid. He was horrid, but he did love Maxie, and they got closer right after Nathan died, and she was heavily pregnant with Nathan's son, James. And as a matter of fact, it was Peter who was with her when she went into labor in the car, and it was Peter who delivered her baby, and she really gave him the benefit of the doubt, and they bonded, and she fell for him. But he was just evil inside. He was truly Faison's son all the way to his black heart. He had lied, he had deceived everyone about who he was, why he was in Port Charles, and what his agenda was. When Maxie finally figured out that he was just a bad guy, she was pregnant by then. She got pregnant by him. That is the father of her daughter, Louise, and he went completely insane. And so Maxie had him convinced that the person who delivered her baby when she was hiding out in Nixon Falls, that this crazy nurse that he had following her had kidnapped the baby. That isn't what happened. This is actually at the time we met Dr. Austin Gatlin Holt, also played by Roger Howarth, and he delivered her baby out in the woods, and then she had handed the baby off to Brooklyn Quartermain to pretend that it was her baby. This was so convoluted, such a soapy plot. BLQ was wearing a fake baby belly. She had had this one-night stand with Valentine Cassadine and had convinced Valentine she was pregnant with his child, and that was to help get the ELQ shares away from him. So it was a dual purpose plot where Maxie was able to place Louise with BLQ. She could still see the baby. She had convinced everyone else that the crazy nurse that Peter had hired to stalk her had taken the baby and run, but that nurse was actually dead in a pit in Nixon Falls because Maxie had realized when she was chasing her that the wood was unstable, and so she fell to her death, and they just left her there for a while. So he really wanted his baby. He wanted Louise, but could not find her. And then, of course, once he figured out that Louise was hiding in plain sight, then all hell broke loose. And in fact, towards the end, Peter actually died twice and almost died a third time. He had poisoned Harrison Chase, Detective Harrison Chase, brother of Dr. Hamilton Finn. And Finn and Peter had a confrontation on the roof of General Hospital, and Peter threw the antidote off the roof. And then when they were back on the stairs, Finn threw Peter down a flight of stairs, and he and Liz Weber thought the guy was dead. They chunked him into a freezer in this secret lab that you could only access from this peculiar elevator at General Hospital. Anyway, when they finally came back around to do something about the body, of course the body was gone. He was also attempted to be poisoned to death by Brad Cooper, who was influenced to do that, but he survived that. But then he died for real. And the question was, how did he die? Well, he had completely snapped. He had been threatening Maxie and stalking her, and he wanted their daughter, and he wanted Maxie, and she was like, no, and so he snapped, and he was going to kill her. But her mother, Felicia Scorpio, whacked him upside the head, and he probably would have survived had they gotten him prompt medical attention, but it didn't go that way. Anna Devane, who for a long time thought that she was his mother, and he thought for a long time that she was his mother, she sat there at his side so he wouldn't die alone, but she let him bleed out from that head wound because he had wreaked so much havoc and he was such a monster that she couldn't allow him to live, but it broke her heart. But at least he didn't die alone. And that is the 7 guys who died as part of Maxie's death curse. Let's run back through it real quick. We have Jesse Beaudry, we've got Cooper Barrett, we've got Logan Hayes, we've got Franco, we've got Levi Dunkleman, Nathan West, and Peter August. That's 7. And so the Twitter user who reached out to us was correct. She does have a higher death count of ex-lovers than Michael, but it's not double, but it is definitely a higher body count than his. So the advice is, if you visit Port Charles, avoid both Michael Corinthos and Maxie Jones like the plague, because if you fall for them, you might wind up pushing up daisies.
Thank you for being a loyal listener. Follow us wherever you get your podcast, because you don't want to miss the next episode. Soap Dirt is on all the major podcast platforms, including Apple Podcast, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and more.